Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed the presentation so far. I think my take is just a little bit different, but so it'll be an interesting discussion. So my work is based in part on how technology and artificial intelligence in particular will change the professional work of lawyers and what that means for our obligations as legal educators. And I've been focused on things that are a little bit different than ChatGPT and generative AI, but as I'll explain today, at its heart, I think that my key conclusions and arguments will hold in the case of AI as well. So, in a nutshell, what I think that lawyers can do and can contribute that AI can't is to think and understand at a deep and creative level and use that capacity to help individuals, organizations, and society. And where that will be especially helpful is in dealing with things like non-routine work, novel legal and regulatory questions, designing new legal frameworks and systems, or designing legal services at scale. And the key to all of this is that lawyers are going to need to double down on the deep conceptual understanding from first principles, as well as at the same time developing the capacity to do something that's called problem setting, which I will get back to in just a minute. So in my previous work, I focused on the idea of AI as a prediction machine, which is a phrase from the work of A.J. Agrawal, Avi Goldfarb, and Joshua Gans, where AI will make prediction increasingly accurate and efficient. So there's a company called Blue Jay Legal that predicts with great accuracy whether a worker will be deemed an employee or contractor for tax purposes. Things like contract analysis that can flag likely issues in a particular agreement, AI-assisted legal research, things like that. And the capacity that lawyers are going to need is related to a specific conception of judgment that's a complement to that type of prediction. So the conception of judgment is, and this is similar to the previous presentation, on the one end, the ability to translate the real world situations into legal problems. And then at the other end of the process, where we have an array of options that give us a mix of things we value with differing probabilities, how do we use that information to help our clients? So back to problem setting. This is the part that I've focused on in particular. And the first step is to look at a problematic situation and structure it into something that we recognize as a problem that we can go about trying to figure out how to solve in a useful manner. So this is from the work of Donald Schoen. And the key idea here is that this is a process of sense making. So I could go on forever about problem setting, but I'm going to stop and instead move on to the part that's important for legal educators, which is my particular area. And that question is, how can we help our students develop the capacity for problem setting? And the literature tells us that for problem setting, you need to have two things: deep and well-organized domain knowledge, and also practice in using that knowledge to make the leap from a problematic situation to a useful problem. And the reason you need that well-organized conceptual framework is because that leap requires what Voss and Post say is selecting parameter values for open constraints in a manner that leads to a meaningful solution given the goals at hand. So that we want our lawyers to be able to construct the problem in a way that's going to be useful in terms of moving forward towards whatever it is our goals are. And so education theorists, and this is not in legal, but in general, Bruner, he advocates that the goal should always be to teach our students the most fundamental understanding that can be achieved of the principles that give structure to a subject, leading to one of my very favorite Bruner quotes: "Discovery, like surprise, favors the well-prepared mind." I think we've done a pretty good job of that in legal education. The other piece, though, where we are doing more, but not traditionally haven't done as much, is to help our students get practice in deploying this domain knowledge to structure problems. So lots and lots of practice making sense of ill-structured problem spaces and being able to use that to frame a useful question or problem. Okay, so finally on to why we're all here today, ChatGPT and other generative AI. It's a little bit different, like I said, from the other types of AI that I have been looking at. And that's because it's still a prediction machine, but instead of predicting a legal issue or a winning strategy directly, what it's doing, and I'm sure you've heard about this today is that it predicts what the next word might be, how a written product might move towards that goal. So it's not designed to find the truth about something. It can't actually think or understand. This makes it worse at some things that we've looked to machines to do before. Uh, not good at word problems unless you do the chain of thought, the process, but it's better than lots of things that AI has struggled with in the past. So semantic context and things like that. Um, I am going to go through this very quickly because you've probably heard this today. I'm in North America, and so I have not been up since 4 in the morning. So I apologize if you've been through this already. Limitations of generative AI, hallucination. It's not actually thinking. It only knows the data it was trained on, which is the internet with all the brilliance and also garbage that's in there. It's biased as a result of that. And some ethical problems with it, again, biased and otherwise problematic training data. It appropriates our data when we use it, so there are privacy concerns, intellectual property issues because it was trained on data, and obviously OpenAI did not get permission from everyone who's ever posted anything on the internet to use their data for training. Because of the computing power it uses, it's bad for the environment, and of course, it turbocharges misinformation and fraud. And there are ways, of course, to mitigate these harms, including additional layers of training on specialized data, as Harvey is supposed to do, chain of thought and other prompting techniques, human reinforced learning, technical features that try and restrict a particular instance so it mitigates privacy concerns, and as we discussed before, having humans as part of this loop or apparatus, as we just discussed. Okay, so strengths. Right now, very good at working with existing documents, summarizing them, comparing them. It can generate a first draft that has to be used very carefully because of hallucinations and bias and other things that we don't want in there. Again, it could generate routine written documents with some care. And there's also been some interesting ideas on how to use it to actually act as a thinking partner. So it's pretty good at generating potential counter arguments and helping you kick the tire on your arguments. This is a screenshot from a presentation by Daza Greenwood about how to use ChatGPT for the DC legal hackers in February 2023. And he concludes his presentation with this slide about the role of lawyers. And this is a theme that I think we've heard in the other presentations today, focusing on the inputs and the outputs. So the role of lawyers, again, is the capacity to frame the problem or question at the beginning, to know what information or facts are important, and to use that knowledge of the law to assess and interpret the output. So that presentation by Greenwood was very much focused on the practicality specifically of using ChatGPT, and it's not exactly aligned with the idea of judgment I was talking about earlier, but it does sort of rhyme with that idea. And I wanted to, sorry, gone too far. So I wanted to just talk briefly about something that is all the buzz in legal education, higher education, education in general, is should we still be giving our students writing assignments? Because I think this is a good way to think about how legal education should be dealing with this new technology. And I think the important thing is to draw a distinction between writing with the goal of creating a written product and writing with the goal of using that process to think and clarify our own thought processes, which leads to two complementary imperatives. To the extent that legal work often requires written work product, ChatGPT can help speed up the production of those written outputs, and particularly if we give it relevant information, direct it step by step through the process, and use our own expertise to correct hallucinations and bias and fill in the gaps. And for that, we need to teach our students how to use ChatGPT effectively. So we'll want to give them assignments that not only allow, but encourage them to practice using generative AI. But part of what we need for our students to use ChatGPT effectively are all the things that we always thought were important to teach them. And that's the deep, conceptually well-organized domain knowledge. And this is what will help them decide what information or context to feed into ChatGPT to create the prompts and structure the chain of thought and to assess and improve the output. And that's the kind of judgment we discussed at the beginning of this presentation. And for that, we might want to consider having some assignments that teach students how to use writing as a tool for thinking and ask them maybe not to use ChatGPT for those assignments. So, for example, my daughter's an engineer. They are not allowed to use graphing calculators for some of their exams. They need to graph things by hand. But if they have other assignments, like a design project, they are told they must use a graphing calculator. So you need to know intimately what kind of data and information is going in and what the output means. But once you do know that, it can be useful to generate maybe 50 graphs and use that to guide your problem-solving efforts. So this is just an interesting example of that idea of using generative AI as a thinking tool. And so that's my plug, to have some assignments where you are asking your students and still teaching them to use writing as a tool for thinking, which is more important than ever.